What's up, YouTube? A Convicts Perspective with your homie Rojo.
Hey, it's your boy Flacco. Please hit the like and subscribe button. So on today's topic, it's going to be a very interesting topic, one that, we want to discuss and basically want to get some viewers, especially from the South Sider point of view. We're going to discuss the South Side government, also known as SSG, and did they ever even exist?
Yeah, back in, I want to say probably 94, we had got rumors about, like a farm level organization under the MA. And for some reason, it was referred to as the Southside government. I never was able to substantiate where these claims initiated from. There was never no solid information that I was given behind why people believed that this, subgroup of the Mexican Mafia existed. And I was never able to find out any more. I've researched and I've looked online. I've looked at, RICO indictments, in regards to the MA and, gang sweeps down south and injunctions. And I've looked through every bit of information and I've talked to every, person older and more knowledgeable than myself in some of these, topics. And I just haven't been able to find any proof that they've existed. And if they did, why they were called the Southside government. Was that really the name? I don't know, man. Like, everybody knows who's followed me knows that I was, in the same pod and next door to some really powerful and knowledgeable individuals. And it was even a rumor amongst them. There was never nothing concrete. When I joined the NR, when I joined the NF, etc. And, my personal opinion is I'm very skeptical, because I would believe, in the amount of time that has passed, that something would have came to light naming this organization as a conspirator of some kind of indictment, or somebody would have debriefed and mentioned specifically these names. And, they may or may not have, but it hasn't came to light in any avenue that I've pursued in order to ascertain this information. So as far as the Southside government, in my opinion, I believe they have some sort of, lower level organization under them, sort of like the NF used to have the Nuestra Raza. But man, I just haven't found nothing to substantiate those claims, man.
See, back in 1976 is when CDC started to put the validation clamp on all organizations. I want to say 76, I believe. Am I correct, Rahul?
I'm not sure. I thought it was a little bit later. I thought it was 78. But
76 or 78, one of those years. And at that time, as we all know, the NF and MA were really having a power struggle out there in the streets and in prisons, as there was just as many neighborhoods that were down south that were under NF control as well as up north. There was certain hoods that were under MA control. And from my understanding is that the MA started the Sureños, and their rumor was that all NF were basically Norteños. And so I've heard this, I've had three theories on the SSG, right? I heard initially they were called the Southern government, which was in reaction to the first Sureños, but they didn't have no type of structure. They were basically just Sureños. I don't know if this is true or not. The second theory I heard is that they had founded themselves in the early 80s, and in response to that is how the Nuestra Raza started, which kind of makes sense with the Southern government. And the third thing is that it was a faction that just came about basically in the 90s, and we used to hear different terms as far as what SSG would be representing. Basically, they would use terms like royalty and loyalty. They would have a pyramid with a circle on it, and they would also have certain crowns on them. But we were never able to substantiate proof that these individuals even existed. And I've reached out, right, to Tony on stories written by a current prisoner who talks to a lot of ex-Sureños on his channel. And I told him, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you ask these individuals that have had 20, 30 years if they've ever even heard of an SSG? He told me he has two individuals, and both of them said that the SSG never exists. They never even heard about it. Now, so my understanding now is did the SSG ever exist? Because when you would go into a household, when I got to Corcoran Shoe, we would start to classify certain individuals. Okay, this person's a regular Sureño, this person's SSG, and how we would determine that would be which Sureños were basically carried the most weight within the pod, who was doing the MA's bidding. So in retrospect, I've done the same thing Rojo's done. When I read The Black Hand, right, by Boxer Enriquez, I was waiting for him to mention something about the Southside government. You know, all the debriefing reports that you see as far as within all these organizations, and no one's ever mentioned anything about anything called the SSG. And the way we were taught in our schooling is the SSG was basically either our NR was in response to it, or the SSG was in response to the Nuestra Raza. Now, I've talked to a few other Sureños and tried to get a better understanding, and not one of them has been able to clarify this. I know there's certain tattoos certain titles that they use behind the wall, such as residents, rather Southsiders, and camaradas, and that there's certain tattoos like the G shield that they wear, which is basically the Aztec shield, and that represents someone that's a camarada, which is basically a strong sympathizer and one who is a representative of the MA. But I haven't been able to confirm anything about this SSG organization, and it just goes to show and make me feel like, how much other information and propaganda have we been taught?
Yeah, I think some of it, it could have been, there might have initially been some thought that, somebody overheard something or, misunderstood something to cause them to believe that this, unsubstantiated organization ever existed. But, a lot of it, even if it wasn't the case and, we heard rumors, it could be propaganda, man. But basically, I would think that would be used to motivate, hermanos at the time to be better, like, hey, these guys have these people as well, and, they're similar to you, and you got to strive to be better, because, they're growing, they're doing this in response to you guys, so you guys got to continue to push, pull, strive, and lead the way. But, yeah, man, going back to this whole thing, I'm leaning 100%. God, that's a hard one. I'm leaning really hard toward no. Did they have an organization, that was similar to RNR? I would probably have to say yes, at least in title, maybe not in, exact correspondence with what the NR meant to the NF, but something, similar, maybe even less loosely affiliated with not so much, what's the word I'm looking for? Commitment, such a strong commitment level as the NR. But man, I would think an organization like that would have to have, some kind of mid-level group where they would draw a strong recruiting pool. I mean, it makes sense for an organization of that size to, put somebody like almost on like a probation, to keep a better eye on them, the leaders of these big barrios they got in LA or San Diego or inland, and just, hey, do we want these people to be us? Well, let's train them a little bit less than we would train, a MA member, but let us develop them to see how they're going to be. I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, that's why the NF did it with the NR. So I see it as a possibility, man, but as far as it being just the Southside government and this, I'm leaning toward no, man, because something would have came to light.
So that's one thing that we've always been taught, Rojo, and I want you to elaborate on this. I've never ever seen the MA really give any of the Sureños any schooling. I mean, you can sit there in a pod and watch their activities all day. You don't see kites going back and forth, you know what I mean? You don't see Clecha, you know what I mean? It's only basically business I see, you know what I mean, as far as a representation.
Man, when I was in C12, there was only two, and we actually had one, the younger one. There was an MA member named Fernando, and we called him Fernie, and he was in the cell with his son, and we had him labeled as a SSG. I don't know if what we were doing was basically labeling him as a very strong representation of Sureños, or a very, beginning member of the MA. I mean, that's how we classified it when I was in C12 back in 95, 96. But when I came back to the Bay a few years later, man, in 98, I was in C10, and there was a couple MA members in there and a couple Sureños upstairs. There was two MAs next to me and Flaco from Santa Rosa. But I would see them passing stuff, and I would see the Sureños writing all day. You know what I mean? And I was thinking that they were educating them, man, because I had a real strong feeling they weren't MA just by their age and, their lack of professional conduct. I'm not saying that they were, any kind of idiots or nothing like that, man, but their professionalism just wasn't up to par as the rest of the people in that organization or our own would be. but they were definitely doing some kind of education. I mean, who knows, what kind of level it was, man. They could have been doing, there's, like you said, business, man. It's really hard to say, man, because, we don't get all up in their business, where they're not, voluntarily sharing anything, so, man, we're just doing guesswork, man. But the two that I would see, man, when I knew that there was two MAs downstairs, they were steadily on paper, man. They could have been writing letters, I mean, it's hard to say. But if they're going to Pelican Bay, them Southsiders, they're getting their education. They're getting their schooling of some sort. I mean, I don't know if it's anywhere near the level of intensity that Norteños would get when they got to the Bay, depending on where they landed. But they got to be preparing them for something,
So this is a big question because we have a lot of Sureños and Southside listeners, whether active or inactive, and the only one who's ever said that anything about SSG has been us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm waiting for some type of clarification, like someone who started doing time in the 70s or 80s, or who was pushing the hard line or was deeply involved in the politics, because there's been politics since day one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Furthermore, man, if anybody's out there, whether you were MA or you're Sureño, active, not active, don't matter to me. You're fine with me. But if you don't want to say nothing all in the comments, man, just be like, hey, I got a question for you. Can I get your email? We'll drop you an email real quick, or post yours, and we'll get at you, man. But we've always wondered about this, man. I've been wondering about the SSG since the very early 90s. You know what I mean? 93, 94. And there's been no way to confirm or deny.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of ex-NF members and a lot of hermanos that and we've all discussed this, and we've all came to the same conclusion. We don't think there was ever any SSG.
Yeah, I don't think so.
We think that this was propaganda that was put out there for us to basically tighten up our own security and look for potential targets. And so anytime someone got to a yard and we felt that they were starting to structure it and tighten up the Sureños and their program changed, we would remove them.
Yeah, we would attribute it to SSG. You trying to take over the yard for them, man.
That we looked at the SSG the same way we did NLR. So basically, if they were a strong MA sympathizer, which is what we looked at as the SSG, we looked at them as their own faction and movement that was opposed to us, that was there to press us, that they were doing the MA bidding. So there was probably a lot of individuals that we targeted that were just trying to get the people united that we probably just took out under false pretenses, man.
Yeah, just well-educated Sureños. See, the thing is, man, is we pay attention to your conduct, and also just as importantly is how people are going to conduct themselves around you. So you got an individual that goes to the yard and he's professional, he's clean, his conduct's up to par, his awareness is up to par. We notice that. We notice that immediately. So you got a big group of loose-knit dudes that are kind of like, kind of lackadaisical and, kind of chilling like a little bit too much for where they're at. And then you see somebody else come on the yard and all of a sudden those individuals, characteristics and behavior change. We're on top of that and we're looking at why. Oh, well, there's that new dude. Well, you see how they all kind of stand around him and look at him? Man, it doesn't have to be nothing obvious. Like they're not, just handing him over drugs or money, but just by the way that they conduct themselves in his presence. When I just watch them, horse playing with their little homies over there, 50 feet away, they go over by this dude and all of a sudden they're kind of at attention. We check that out, man, and we would attribute it to him either being MA or Southside government.
Well, it's kind of a trip, right? Because if you really think about it, now, I'm thinking outside the box, and I'm trying to be logical and analytical. I don't see the MA giving any type of faction that much authority on a yard, unless it was under their umbrella.
Exactly.
So I don't see them rising for any movement, because anytime you create any type of movement or sub-faction, you always risk that they're going to spiral on their own.
True.
And these MA members, man, they're sharp. The way they operate their business is a little bit different than the NF, where they do have Sureños out there that represent them on the streets, that take care of their taxes, that collect their money, and they're given a certain territory, and no other MA member is supposed to intervene in their dealings. And if so, they start to communicate. Okay, well, this transaction is going to here. We're going to cover here. Get out, back up over here. It gets really political, man. It's a whole different structure as opposed to the NF, to where this person here, but he's still reporting to this person here, and all these laws are under here, and it's a whole bigger territory as opposed to them. Hey, they're taking care of their neighborhoods most of the time.
Yeah, I think the thing with that is, man, their neighborhoods down there are so massive. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of their hoods, like San Jose is probably the biggest with the most people as far as homies go up here, I would imagine, safe to say. Down there, man, 80% of their hoods are the size of San Jose. You know what I mean? You got hoods down there with 10,000 people in them. You know what I mean? Where some of our towns up here don't even have 10,000 people. So they have to run things a little bit different based on numbers, man. But they got numbers in their hoods that are equivalent to multi-regiments. If they were up north, that would cover 2 or 3 regiments because their areas are so big and their manpower is so vast.
Only difference is if that territory's under your control, you're the one seeing the money.
Yeah, they got to be kicking back something, you would think.
You know what I mean? You know,
very interesting.
I'm wondering, you know, does the inmate have one organizational bank, or do they just take care of their own members individually? Like, okay, if this dude's out here representing, I'm getting all this money. Do I have to kick back to the whole organization? Whereas the NF, you know, you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, and I know somebody out there is going to go ahead and give us that information. Hint, hint.
All right, man, but this is just a short video, man. It's more of a question out there because, you know, just a thought that we're thinking about. Was there ever an SSG, a Southside government? Did they exist?
I would say no, man. I would say it was paranoia, propaganda, or maybe just some kind of weird homeboy being like, oh, yeah, they got this stuff called SSG, bro. I mean, it could be as simple as that to spread like wildfire. I've seen worse things spread faster. You know?
All right, guys.
All right, man. Hit that like and subscribe for us, man, and have a good rest of your day.
All right, we out.